Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. More contaminated water for veterans, military, and families. This is a horrible situation. I want to share it with you here. Before we jump into it, I want to throw out a special thank you to Twitch Radio. Twitch Radio, thank you so much for that super comment. It really does mean a lot to me. I appreciate your support. Thank you so very much, Twitch Radio. All right, so before we jump into this, anytime you see anything that is stating that there's some sort of a potential toxic exposure or elements that are causing sickness or illness to veterans or military members, take heed and look at it and start to develop your evidence if you happen to have a condition that is related to that and you served in that area. So currently, what we're going to talk about is not a presumptive condition. If these are not presumptive situations, if you will, you need to prove your nexus. If you need to prove your nexus, please use my team, my medical team. They will do a free consultation for you. They will do a fantastic Nexus letter with all of the elements that it's needed by the VA in order to develop that service connection for you. And if you need to get DBQ, they can do that for you as well. If you're trying to get SMC, if you're trying to establish any sort of evidence like that, the doctors are nationwide. They're able to help you via telehealth and really make it easy. And they understand the nuance of the VA. And that's the important part, is they know the ins and outs of the VA and what is required by the VA. I'll drop that link in both the description and the comments. Just remember, free consultation. Nexus letter is to get service connection. DBQ is to get the appropriate rating. With that, let's jump into this, because this type of information can absolutely become rationale for a Nexus letter, which is why I'm throwing that out there. So let's jump over to this video that I have, and let's watch and see what they have to say about toxic water here for our military and veterans.
Across the nation, hundreds of military sites have contaminated waterways with toxic forever chemicals. Last night, we brought you the story of one Michigan community pressuring the Air Force to clean up the decades-old contamination. Tonight, special correspondent Megan Thompson reports on the potential health impacts of that toxic water and the veterans who fear it has made them sick.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, almost all the grandchildren. There's Mitchell in the center.
Craig and Carrie Miner's home in Cedarville, Ohio is filled with family photos.
This is my favorite picture. Taylor's holding Mitchell's head up, and I just love that picture of all 4 of the kids.
Mitchell is the Miner's third child, born in 1989 with severe disabilities.
Mitchell had cerebral palsy and he had microcephaly, major seizure disorders. He was completely quadriplegic.
Carrie provided around-the-clock care for him until he died in 2020 at the age of 30.
He was a daddy's boy. We loved him dearly.
Doctors suggested a virus could have caused Mitchell's disabilities, but a year before he died, Craig saw something on TV that made him think otherwise.
They were talking about contamination at all these bases through firefighter foam, and Wirt Smith's name came up.
Wirt Smith, as in the former Air Force Base in Oscoda, Michigan, where Craig was stationed for 4 years as a B-52 bomber pilot. It's also where the family lived when Carrie was pregnant with Mitchell. The base made headlines after widespread groundwater contamination was discovered in 2010. It was caused by firefighting foam crews used for decades to practice putting out jet fuel fires, containing chemicals called per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS for short.
PFAS have been shown to affect multiple systems in the body. So here's our freezer.
Courtney Kerrigan is an environmental epidemiologist at Michigan State University who studies the effects of PFAS on human health. She says there's some level of PFAS in almost every American's blood.
They're used in a lot of different products that most people use or have in their homes, things like Scotchgard, nonstick pans.
There are around 15,000 different types of PFAS, and once in our bodies or the environment, they don't break down quickly. It's why they're known as forever chemicals.
Our bodies actually see them as useful. We don't excrete them, they don't break them down, and they're being reabsorbed and recirculated in the body. And so it can take years for PFAS to be eliminated. And so when we have a sample come into the lab,
Kerrigan says PFAS exposure is believed to cause a litany of health problems like cardiovascular disease and kidney and testicular cancers.
My blood's been tested. I got 5 different PFAS, PFNA, PFXHS, P4, P this, P that in my blood at 95% above the whatever it is. I'm just so upset.
The discovery of PFAS 14 years ago still has many Oscoda residents angry and concerned about their health. The base closed in 1993, but the PFAS had been leaking into nearby lakes, rivers, and some residents' well water.
I usually only use a sinker down here when the current's really heavy.
Lowell Miller grew up across the lake from the base in the area where PFAS were found in the drinking water.
Pretty much once or twice a week, we'd have venison and fish.
In this rural area, hunting and fishing are a source of tourist dollars and an affordable way to put food on the table, but only when it's safe. The state of Michigan now warns that fish, deer, and other game from certain areas should not be eaten.
It definitely changed things up here because...
So here's my take so far is that if the local government is that concerned about the PFAS, that means that there have been studies, right? Those studies could be utilized if you were there during any time frame that's allocated within these reports, and you can utilize that as rationale if you have any conditions that would be linked to PFAS, for example, right? If condition X is more likely due to high levels of PFAS, and you have it, and you were at this location or any other location like this where you can get your hands on some documents, let my medical team know, or your doctor know, or whoever you're working with know that information, because they can utilize that in the Nexus letter as rationale. Let's move on.
A lot of the people that were living off of that, they have to worry. A lot of them have moved.
But contaminated fish and meat were just the start of Miller's worries. In 2015, he lost his father to lung and brain cancer. 4 years later, his mother died from a rare form of cervical cancer. 2 of his siblings also had cancer and other health issues.
Sure, cancer, I guess, is getting bad all over the place, but it just seems to be targeting people more around the area. So it just makes me wonder.
But he's not giving up hunting and fishing. It's how he earns a living, with his handmade fishing lure business and YouTube channel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another adventure.
Honestly, after losing my mom and my dad, I don't have anything anymore. I really don't. So to me, the way I'm looking at it is if I die from eating fish, at least I'm enjoying my life,
The state of Michigan is collecting blood samples from Oscoda residents to determine their PFAS exposure. Veterans who served at Wurtsmith in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when firefighting foam was being used, want something similar done for them. But the federal agency tasked with studying it for the Pentagon has declined, saying there isn't sufficient information to know when the base drinking water became contaminated or how much PFAS was in the water decades ago.
People have their...
And now remember, the burden of proof is equipoise. If you have enough evidence to bring it to essentially a 50-50, the VA is supposed to rule in your favor. And we have a current case at the Supreme Court regarding the benefit of the doubt rule and that it was not being applied appropriately. The collateral effects of that, I think, are going to play in the veterans' benefit in that the process is going to be a little more favorable along the way. So, sure, DOD can't say, but if it's a 50-50 shot, the VA should rule in your favor. So let's keep that in mind.
Head buried in the sand.
If the government wouldn't connect the dots, Craig Miner decided he would.
This whole thing here goes way back.
Miner, who has a law degree and a degree in chemistry, compiled hundreds of pages of government documents, made YouTube videos, testified at a U.S. Senate field hearing. He even wrote a book.
They dumped the PFAS on the ground 500 yards from the main water wells.
Miner found documents showing the Air Force poured firefighting foam on the ground next to the base's drinking water source, even after 3M, the manufacturer, recommended it not be disposed of that way. Miner also found tests done by the state of Michigan in 2016 showing PFAS levels in the groundwater near those wells as high as 46,000 parts per trillion. The new EPA drinking water standard is 4 to 10 parts per trillion.
Bottled water wasn't a thing back then. So you drank, you cooked in it, you showered in it.
Miner had his blood tested and estimates that back when he was on base, he had roughly 250 times more PFAS in his blood than what the National Institutes of Health considers safe.
The only way you're getting that kind of exposure is if you were drinking it.
Miner believes PFAS contributed to his son Mitchell's poor health and his own.
Recently, I've had quintuple bypass surgery. So every artery in my heart was blocked. We eat really well. I don't drink. I don't smoke. This is all the meds.
Studies show a strong correlation between PFAS exposure and high cholesterol. But that's just Miner's latest issue. At Wurtsmith in his 20s, he developed a tumor on his back and an enlarged prostate. He's also had vision problems, bone pain, and an enlarged heart, liver, and spleen.
There's no cameras inside my body or anybody else's body. We can never go to the exact point and say, aha, I see PFAS present and this thing is happening.
To receive disability benefits from the Veterans Administration, a person must prove their condition is connected to military service. But according to a recent report, illness caused by chemicals is very hard to prove. Some health issues are deemed presumptive, automatically connected to service, so veterans can skip the red tape. But historically, troops exposed to toxic chemicals have had to wait about 34 years for a presumptive to be established. In September, the VA announced it's considering the first PFAS presumptive for veterans with kidney cancer who were exposed.
Now remember, presumptive eliminates the need for a nexus. If it's not a presumptive condition for a presumptive circumstance, then you have to prove the nexus. That's where Nexus Letter comes into play and developing your claim with all of the evidence you need. Let's move on.
In a statement to PBS News Weekend, a VA press secretary said, "Our top priority is providing veterans with the health care and benefits they deserve. And the VA is delivering more benefits to more veterans than ever before."
Not only do you need to clean up the PFAS on the ground, but you need to clean it up in the people.
After more than 20 years in the military, Craig Miner qualified for full VA benefits, mostly because he started getting sick while he was still serving. But his fight isn't over, because he believes so many more people deserve the same recognition and care.
Like you had burn pits in Iraq and like you had Agent Orange in Vietnam. But this happened on American soil. And not only did it happen to the veterans, but it happened to their wives and their children.
For PBS News Weekend, I'm Megan Thompson in Cedarville, Ohio.
Yeah, wow. You know, it's another situation right now. This has happened all over the place. There's, obviously you have Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune. You have talks about it at the old Fort Ord. So there's other locations. I believe there was one in, one in Hawaii, I think. Anyway, they're all over, right? No matter how it happens, there's always issues with the water for some reason. The bottom line is if you can get your hands on a report that says that the levels are higher and have been higher substantially than ever before, or than what's allowable, then that is a piece of evidence for you. Work with your doctor to establish a nexus. Get that Nexus Letter from your doctor. With that, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.